You know, in your talk, you sort of touched on something interesting that I think is in fact always in the back of people's minds, that nature of when they feel like engineers or designers are coming into the workplace and rethinking how all this stuff's going to happen, there's a natural sort of fear in the back of your head about how that will transform things, and you know, whether it's automation or the augmentation, you know, how that's going to change the nature of my work. You mentioned the replacement issue, but I think this is a debate, you know, that's gone back hundreds of years almost to industrial engineering and tailorization of workplace, and when people try to break these things down or bring in engineering solutions to different types of work. How much are you still finding that there's that fear factor there when you start talking about these things? I mean, it seems clear both of you have this sort of notion on your mind as you're thinking about how to introduce these concepts and how to think about talking to people about them.
The fear of substitution is critical, and it's very important. As I mentioned, even millennials, I was surprised that my daughter would actually feel substituted by that machine as they go forward. So substitution is a real fear. However, it's about augmentation, really, and I mentioned that before, because that's really where the system can do something that we can't. There's one thing so far, maybe that's going to change, because we always, you know, predict some things and it happens faster than we think, but that empathy, for example, is something that computers even will never be really good at. I mean, if we looked at Ex Machina, or if we looked at Her, the man that falls in love with his operating system, imagine that. It's possible actually to look at something where computers are not always be able to replicate a certain number of things that we as humans have learned by millions of years of evolution. So, yes, substitution is real, but at the same time, it has happened, you said, over the centuries, and I've seen cases where the first fear is actually being replaced by the understanding it can do better. I'll go quickly into an example, very simple one. We introduced a fraud detection system at an insurance company about 2 years ago. And the people that were doing looking at the fraud and the claims were saying, oh my God, it's going to replace us, it's going to be a nightmare. You know, I don't want your system around. And after 3 months of usage, they realized the system was actually putting out all the easy to detect fraud. And they only stuck with the tough cases, the one they can sink their teeth into. They loved it. And they became the best proponent of the system we had. So sometimes it takes a little bit of time.
Well, I suspect that we are fundamentally lazy. So every time that we need to learn new things, we need somehow to go outside our comfort zone. So in the case of replacement, new tools, learning to do new things, learning to do new jobs, that's a big problem. A big problem related to innovation. Exactly the fact that we need to do something that we don't know how to do. We need to change, we need to learn. We have done recently a workshop in Florence where we have been working with artisans. They have fantastic skills. They work with paper, ceramic, textile, leather, and they made very beautiful products. And a bunch of MIT students went to Florence and started to say, well, we can also use 3D printing and other forms of computational tools to do other stuff. As soon as we arrived at the table, the first statement was, innovation is our enemy. Of course, they're very comfortable and they master what they do in a very efficient and powerful way. So we achieve a kind of relaxed and comfort zone. When we bring new machines, new tools, that is very difficult to understand, even to understand how parametric design can help artisans to create beautiful homemade, craft-and-made papers. It's very hard. Well, so after the workshop, they hired some of our researchers, so we achieved a good result from I hate and innovation is our enemy. They understood and embraced it. But again, the problem, as you were saying, like between the substitution and being able to understand that it's not only a matter of substitution, but how mechanical tasks can free us from mechanical tasks and leave space for more creative jobs, that's potentially is a great opportunity. It's difficult to embrace because also, given like new media, new technologies, we are also changing all the parameters. It's no longer you learn something and then you apply to a job, but in parallel, you learn, you work, and it's more an agile lifestyle that put us every time as a professor, as a learner at the same time, and so we need to switch also roles. So those are some key elements that characterize the future of work and how we learn stuff.
I mean, the other challenge, it seems like, as I'm watching both presentations, is that if we look ahead 5, 10 years and we're seeing these things deployed and really taking effect in the workplace, I think about myself, my ability to absorb all this information. Again, you sort of touched on this, like having signals or information that's contextual, relevant, but in general, I mean, I think we all feel this to some degree now, that you're just, data can be very exciting in the abstract, but you often feel overwhelmed by it. And also, coming from the world of journalism, when someone comes to you and says, well, the data says this, and this is what you should be doing, and forget your instincts, your humanity for a second, here's what the numbers say, that poses a challenge in itself. I mean, is that something you find that you're constantly trying to balance as you think about how to design these things?
Certainly. I mean, all the ongoing discourse about the Internet of Things and the next 50 billions of connected objects, or for Intel are 220 billions of connected objects. I can't even represent what does it mean 220 billions of connected objects. This is certainly an opportunity, but the discourse is about connectivity and information exchange. However, how do we extrapolate the information and make this meaningful to us? And eventually transform this information into know-how, into knowledge, into somehow something that triggers conversation and a different understanding of the world. So that's, you start to have even like Internet of Things right now, they are developing protocols to enable secure transaction. This is a very big element. And secondly, Internet of Things in the sense that technology can start to process data even before transferring and transmitting data, because we have too many data going out. So you start to process data at the basis, but still there is a screening at the basis, but the data is still what is transferred. And it's not, the effort is how we transform those data into knowledge, into know-how, and and bring those into our social life.
Yeah. There's two words that you say are very important. One is instinct and numbers, right? So numbers are, often we see numbers can distract our feelings or what we think something can happen, because for years and years and years we've been trained to think a certain way or react to certain things, and then it shows in fact that reality is not exactly what we thought it was. So numbers are useful for that, but let's never forget instinct. Again, it's been built over also, millions of years. I mean, it's been built over a very, very long time. When you have a nurse coming next to you and you're feeling pain or anything, and they start comforting you, putting your hand on your arm, no system can do that for you. So there is something there also, that instinct piece that you receive or you perceive and you give out, which are very important also, and I should not be ignored. And this is why the combination is so powerful. Not the replacement, but the combination is so powerful.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, again, in my example of Silicon Valley, I mean, they're very strong believers still in that moment that you bump into a colleague in the coffee shop at work, and maybe that's where the next great idea comes from, in a way that the big data, the algorithm is never going to point you in that direction. And then it seems that the hopeful, the optimistic scenario in all this is that these do become, in a sense, liberating tools that, as you were describing your talks, free people up to really focus on where the humanity comes through, and in fact delivers on that promise to make these jobs, in a sense, more human with the help of machines.
There you go. I think the more human part of that is critical, and you're absolutely right. It's like it comes, I think big data in that skepticism is our help, actually. It's like you can never go through all that data by yourself. You can't, you just can't. We are actually dealing with systems today. We have a client in Holland. They are an astronomy called Astron, they're an astronomical institute, and they deal with about 3 exabytes per day. Okay, that's completely, I mean, there's so much data, they can keep everything. So they need to know what to keep. The only people who know what to keep are the astronomers. They can point to the right things, even if they can anticipate there's something they might need a little later, but the system can't discriminate among that, even with all the knowledge we can accumulate in that machine. Yeah. So that amount of data is it works well for that skepticism when you go forward.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add? I think we wanted to leave time for a few minutes of questions, or yes, or no.
The first question is always hard, so we take the second one first.
Do we want to take some questions from the audience, or no? We can keep gabbing up here, so. I think we had a microphone before.
There's a question over there.
There we go.
With a personal assistant like Watson, how can we go out of the comfort zone? Because Watson filter the information for us. We display only what we matters, what we like. But if I have news, I don't know if I like it or no. How in the future this kind of system will filter and modify our conscientious or feelings? Sorry for my English.
Feelings and conscience, right? Yeah, that's the conscience part of it is is the toughest one I've ever dealt with, even during my PhD years. For me, it's an emerging property. So I don't know if Watson is going to grow conscience at some point. I have no idea. It might. But that being said, though, it's an interesting. The Turing test has always been an interesting question around that, right? It's like, am I dealing with a human? Am I dealing with a machine? How can I tell the difference? A movie was made recently about that, Ex Machina, and it's good. It's a good way to do that. Now, the comfort zone, as you say, can be there where you say, am I talking to a real person or not? And then the question is, but does it matter for some tasks? For some others, it might. For some others, it might not matter at all. So the Turing test for that has been a great test going forward. Now, again, the consciousness part of it, frankly, I don't know. I mean, I think we are biological machines that grew an emerging property called a conscience, but that's a personal opinion. That doesn't engage IBM at all, by the way. That's a personal opinion, but that's what we'll see going forward. But Watson is today not as generally knowing as we are. I mean, it is specialized knowing, so it's tough to know exactly what it's going to do in the future at this point.
It's regarding the augmentation. I don't know whether it's true, but I heard that some pilots of planes in emergency situations, they react not so well due to the fact that they had autopilots. And I would like to know whether, based on the personal assistant on medicine, for instance, you had some data to know whether the diagnostic was better or it became more symptom.
That's a good question. We actually had that problem already also with some diagnostic. That's why Watson advises the doctor, not the patient. So Watson doesn't talk to the, it talks to the doctor that has then act as a filter, a human filter, if you will, or human aggregator of what's going on in terms of that. Now, so far, like the areas where there's been some shifts has been for diets for patients that were going into surgery, for heart surgery, for example. So the system was advising the doctor in what kind of a diet that would be optimal for the patient to go under the surgery and recover faster. Right? That was the case. Now, what the system never took into consideration was some of these people were athletes and some other were not. And lacking that knowledge, the consumption of sugar is very different. Well, there's a lot of things I don't specialize on, but because of that, the doctor had to readjust a lot of this understanding and really put back into the system the fact that he knew. The system didn't, but he knew. So in that case of an emergency, for example, also, there's a case where you need to know, well, is it possible to advise the system to gather more information and more type of knowledge? And that's why the education part of Watson is so important. Because you need to be able to have a human saying, no, wait a minute, there's a piece of that you're not taking into consideration, for example.
Well, Arnaud from Politiza, I just have a few questions about the fear of substitution you talk about once ago. Isn't it possible to integrate some laws, well known as Asimov laws, in order to prevent the independence or the constraints that we are as human beings, and to integrate the law in the process of the robots for the future? Thanks.
You have actually a new paper that has been published not long ago and signed by Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking and many as well, called The New Laws of AI. And what it does, it actually looks into how do you build AI systems, artificial intelligence systems, for actually respecting few ethics. We dealt with that with GM recently. For example, they're looking at vehicle-to-vehicle communication, and then you have moral dilemmas. So the car is heading towards someone who's crossing the road. I mean, who do you save? The person in the car, person on the road. Now, there's 10 people on the road, and a car, first, what do you do? So there's all this kind of ethics questions that have to be well understood. And if you're interested, I'm happy to send you the link, if you don't have it, for that paper, which starts that dialogue about the new laws of AI, the new Asimov laws, if you will, to be able then to put some ethics into those systems as well.
Okay. I think that's it for us. Thank you all for being a great audience, and thank you for coming here today.